Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pilosopo podcast. I'm your host. My name is Jiga Jr., and today our guest is a teacher at Ateneo de Cebu. He also co hosts several podcasts, including one that he started years ago called Third World Linux. He also has a podcast among his peers in the world of teaching, a class record, and he currently hosts with a bunch of his friends a podcast called The Bodega Nights.
Yeah.
Our guest today to talk about going online, school podcasting, and social media is none other than Joe or Jao Atienza.
Hey, Jiggy. It's been a while, man.
I know it's been a while, right? How's everything? How's everything?
It's good. Could be better, but with the pandemic and everything. But all things considered, good to know that we both still have jobs. We can't ask for much else, right?
Yeah. It is a totally and completely different world that we inhabit, right? It's so abrupt. The change was so abrupt. We didn't know that we were going to be in this whole new world. I call this one the coronaverse. So we're still trying to figure out how to navigate our way through all of this. And I think the best way that I know how is to talk to people like you, so they can help us. You can help me and all of us watching this navigate through all of this, because I am sure you are an infinite resource of information as far as this goes. Because like you said earlier, you've been doing a podcast since 2013. So you are not new to this.
Yeah, it was really lucky. Something that my boss. Wait, I should preface this by saying that I'm not here as a representative of the institution that I teach at. Right, like HR might kill me. But something that my boss told me. It's like you find yourself in the right place at the right time. Because prior to this, I've been podcasting for the past 7 years now. I kind of like photography, so I have a halfway decent camera. Um, and this is sort of the opportunity, or sort of an opportunity to uh, bring that sort of knowledge into the thing that I'm doing, which is teaching online, or rather teaching, and the kids are online, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So our topic for today is going online, school, podcasting, and social media. My first
Right?
question for you now is, the idea of I don't know if you've heard of the idea of processed information, in the same way that we have processed food, we have
Yeah.
processed information, especially the ones that we consume on social media. It has gone through so many processes before it gets posted on the social media platforms using a very limited number of words. So we can
Right.
never get the full picture of a particular topic, a particular subject. But the thing is, the world is nuanced. The world is never simple. Can you speak to the way we consume information these days?
Um, well, that's kind of the difficulty, It's we live in a world where we have so much information presented to us. We have no other choice but to try to get through it as quickly as possible, lest we get left behind or whatever. Um, it's it's a world that's just really, how do we put this? Um, really averse to nuance, and that is terrible. Uh, well, we do have a class in the K to 12 called Media and Information Literacy. I teach that class, and that seems to be one of the things that we try to do, right? To get people to be more discerning in their consumption of media, a little bit more, a little bit more critical when presented with media. Sort of try to slow down and think things through, and sort of by the same token, try to get people to be a little bit more responsible in their production of media, right? Because it is garbage in, garbage out. But if you know how to sort of properly process the garbage that comes in, you know whether to. The term we like to use is, when you come across a social media post, do you report or repost, right? So when you're presented with something that might be uh, bull, right? Do you report it or do you repost it? But yeah, the idea is to encourage people to just sort of slow down and think about what they're reading. But it's kind of hard, right? Particularly with there's this other level to it, where you have little echo chambers within like social media because of what are they called? Because of algorithms, right? Because of the algorithms that keep on showing you the stuff that you like or the stuff that makes you feel angry. And so not only do we have this very processed information and this very sort of reductionist view of an entire issue, but you also have a social media algorithm that's coming in and taking out the stuff that is not going to engage you and feed you the stuff that's either going to make you really happy or the stuff that's going to make you really angry. And that sort of has this radicalization, there's this effective radicalization. Uh, when you do stuff like ignore people on social media, when you what's it what's it called? When you
You block? What do you mean?
yeah, yeah, mental health people like to talk about this. Um, when you like ignore posts from a particular person, that
You
just yeah, when you mute them or whatever, that just feeds like the AI or the algorithm saying that yeah, less stuff like this, more stuff like this.
yeah.
So it, you know, you block everybody that is and forgive the term. No, if you block everybody that's a Dutertard, you're going to get more, again, forgive the term, Dilawan stuff coming at you. If you block all of your Dilawan, you're going to get more Dutertard stuff coming at you, which will eventually radicalize you even more. So I guess the thing that I really wish people would do more is slow down when looking at posts on social media, sort of reading
Stop and
beyond,
think.
yeah, like reading beyond the headline, and even after reading the article, maybe looking at another point of view, and not willfully ignoring another side to the argument, because once you start blocking people out, that's sort of the end of dialogue, right?
Yeah, and you're talking to an echo chamber, just like-minded people
Yeah,
that you talk to, and you'll never get dissenting opinion. You'll never get opposing opinion, right? So you live in a world where everybody just agrees with you. But back to what you said earlier, Jao, about slowing down. Isn't it counterintuitive uh, uh, when it comes to slowing down? Because isn't the internet, isn't all this technology made to speed things up, to make easier access, to make everything faster, quicker, more accessible? Slowing down, isn't that sort of the opposite of what everything and everyone is trying to let us do?
yeah. I mean, sort of, but let's face it. Like we can't process as fast as a computer. We're still
Exactly.
we're still limited by like this sack of meat that we are. So um, just slow down. Pick your battles is another thing that I like to sort of tell myself when I'm scrolling through social media, and like I see something that's egregious, but it's, not the hill that I want to die on. I don't want to research further into the topic, so I just sort of let it pass. Like, all right, cool, whatever. But
But there's some people who read something on social media and they say that's already everything. I mean, they absorb that as fact, and they walk around and function in the world, knowing that piece of information that they read is already, the complete view of that particular subject matter, and they become ill-equipped to deal with the way things work. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Hello, can you
and
hear me?
yeah, yeah, and that's part of why I became a teacher, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And something else that I like to do is when I'm talking to like my kids about sorry for using that term, but like that's sort of our nomenclature, right? When we talk to the kids about things like fake news, which I really don't like the term very much. Um, when we talk to them about information pollution, misinformation, disinformation, that sort of thing, um, I usually tell them like, you guys are smart enough to be able to tell um, what is and isn't blatantly true on the internet. The people that you have to be worried about are people like my parents, right? Like, they that don't exactly know the difference necessarily between what they see in a Viber chat group and something that they see on like CNN or Sunstar, and we'll just pass it on. So what I try to encourage the kids to do is get them to teach the people that might not know any better, right? So that's sort of the approach that I like to take when it comes to social media and sort of literacy in social media, because these kids are on social media every day, practically 24/7. I think they have a better grasp of what is and isn't necessarily true, more than we
Okay.
give them credit for, and
Hmm.
to sort of empower them to help those that might fall victim to something that is obviously false is, well, that's why I became a teacher, to help people be less of an idiot on the internet.
But how do you based on your own experience, Joe, how do you hash out a truth from the lies, especially the ones that you read on social media? I mean, what is your barometer of the truth? Maybe you can share to us the kind of spectacles that you use to discern whether something is true or not. What is the process in which goes through your mind before you admit something as true or not?
Something that I like to do is, if I see something that is purporting to be true, whether or not it is true, I try to find out whether it's false. Right?
Okay.
So, what do other people have to say about this? What do the more reputable sources of information have to say about this? What would an expert have to say about this? That is something that I think everybody should do: defer to the expert, right? Um, this is why I admire you so much, right? Because when it comes to, say, wanting to find out about how sports are going to work in this new normal, instead of like going on the internet or going on the radio and just talking about whatever comes to mind, you first talk to Rico Navarro to ask him, like, all right, so how is boxing going to work, right? Are the spectators going to wear masks? It's just going to be everybody with a mask and the two boxers without masks, right? So that's something that you might want to do, like defer to an expert. But that really isn't enough. You have to sort of defer to more than one expert, because different people, whether or not they're experts in their field, still see things with a different lens. And so you sort of have to get the consensus of what the experts think. And that's sort of pushing you closer towards the truth, I would think.
So it's becoming increasingly difficult now to figure out what is true or not. Isn't it ironic that we have all this information, but it's becoming more difficult to know the truth because we have all these different sources, pulling you from the left to the right to the center and
Yeah.
all that. So it is quite a challenge, right? And I think it has made education even all the more important, right? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
because we have all this information.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that I used to think, right? I used to think that a lot of education was like a teacher standing in front of the class telling the class the truth, right? But more and more, I'm finding out that education is a process of curation. There is so much information out there. This is the stuff that I think is important and you should check out. Like this is the stuff that's going to help you, say, think about things more critically.
Mhm.
So it isn't, if I may use the cliche that we always get during our like training programs and stuff, the teacher ought not to be a sage on the stage. The teacher ought to be like a guide on the side, right? So it is, we are helping you get through the material by curating the material and sort of giving you a framework for understanding the material, as opposed to us sort of spoon feeding you, because like that's how people uh, get used to believing everything they see, right?
So
So that,
there's less
that
memorization and more understanding of the subject matter, right?
yeah, yeah, more, a lot more analysis, a lot more application. Um, if if we look at like all of these different theories of education, most of them tend to agree that memorization is the lowest form of knowledge. So, um, particularly in this online setup, we have very little by way of memorization, and we try to sort of target the higher thinking skills. So a lot more creation, a lot more application. Um, I used to, and hmm, I probably should do it again, but you know,
Which one?
I used to have as one of the projects for the kids, make a podcast episode,
Hmm.
right? So they create the podcast episode. That way they can sort of slow down and talk exhaustively about a topic. That way they're forced to look at the different sides and sort of arrived at an informed opinion about a particular topic. Um, and there is a lot more of that sort of thing as opposed to like a paper and pencil test where they sit down and regurgitate the stuff that they were supposed to memorize, which is good, which is good. It
I'm
makes for
curious,
better people.
Zhao, are you an outlier when it comes to this view of education, or are your peers in your university, in your school, uh, thinking the same way now?
Um, well, a lot of us do. I think all of us actually do. The thing is, there's still something to be said about, particularly in elementary and high school, developing the memory, right?
Hmm.
So early on, there is a lot more memorization that is done just so that the kids can develop that faculty of memory. But as they move up, um, say straight memorization shouldn't exceed, I can't remember the figure that it's on an Excel spreadsheet when we make our tests, but straight memorization shouldn't be more than like 20% of the test or something. So like there is that, but that's the stuff that kids remember. But for the most part, a lot of people are very much into this idea of more understanding, more application. Even dep ed, um, when it comes to the final grade, a large component of that final grade is meant to be what they call a performance task, which is an application of what students have learned, right? So like in again, just speaking about my personal experience, something that I like to have the kids do is write an editorial, because that is a real world application of literacy in media, literacy in information. And if they can do that, then I can say that, yeah, they are responsible creators of information and responsible consumers of media. You know?
It's difficult to convince people to memorize stuff if they know it's just at the palm of their hands. Whatever information that you're asking for, they can just Google it, right? Or they can just find
Yeah,
out about it on their phones. Nobody memorizes a phone number these
yeah,
days anymore, right?
yeah.
What is the role of memorization when it comes to a person's education, Jao? Because I feel that you hear this a lot these days. That we are a people that's very forgetful. We forget about recent history when we make decisions, when we elect people, when we absorb information, when we make our comments. We forget about the things that happened 10, 20 years ago, and we
Yeah.
just base our information with the very recent memory, the article that we read, let's say last week, and we don't anymore process the information, let's say 10, 20 years ago. So we're
Yeah.
a very kalimtanon bunch of people
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I think memorization has something to do with it. Am I right?
I really wouldn't know. I didn't study developmental psychology.
Okay.
Or, but it is something that, well, makes things easier when talking about sort of the practical application of memorization, right?
Okay.
Um, yeah, that's what I would say.
Um,
it is.
so you're now obviously teaching online, right?
Yep.
Learning and teaching uh, in the classroom is a world apart from a virtually teaching and virtually learning, right?
Yeah.
How are you migrating from real world teaching to virtual teaching?
Well, we've been at it for like 2 weeks now, so
Okay. How's
it's
that working
still
out?
it's still quite tough, right? Because like our school year ended just as the lockdowns were starting to happen. So it was like we canceled finals week and sent the kids out this summer. So we didn't have that same 2 or 3 months where other schools were like scrambling to get something together online. So this is what, our second week doing this, and it's got its pros and cons, right? Like there's obviously something to be said about the energy that you have in the classroom, where you're in front of a bunch of students. You can feed energy off of each other. You can see that kid in the back that's falling asleep. You can call their attention. um, you can see like that. You can see the kid in front that's just like starry-eyed, like, oh my god, like this is, mind blown. Like you don't have those moments.
Visual
um
cues.
yeah, but we still do have visual cues. Like, for example, when I look at you now, I can tell like when you're about to say something, so I just stop.
Mhm.
But how do we put this? It is, yeah, it's tough, but I'm actually kind of digging it, right? Because there is more of a release of responsibility. The student is more in charge of their learning than we are, and this is for the senior high school and for college, right? Like, once you get to a certain age, you're supposed to sort of find out by yourself, right? Again, the teacher being the guide on the side, and this sort of makes it much easier for us to do that. We don't have to spoon feed. We just have to sort of give a direction and say that by the end of this week, you should have accomplished this, and this. You should be able to do this, and this. And instead of it coming from us, it is something that comes from the student. And I think that's something that's very powerful, because the students can sort of take control of their own learning. And it is in a very real way on their terms, just as much as it is on ours, because they're using technology that is familiar to them. They are, um, for the most part, learning at their own pace while trying to achieve the targets that we set. We only come in if there is a need for some sort of intervention, or if there is a need for deepening the lesson. But that's something that I quite like. How students can sort of take control of their own learning. Um, the focus is less on what they know, but like what they do with what they know.
I guess this is their natural habitat, right? Because most of these students woke up to the internet, woke up to social media. So this is like their natural environment. I guess that's why it's sort of difficult for me to wrap my head around the idea of just virtual learning, because I was born and
Yeah.
raised to go to a classroom, right? So
Yeah.
would you think that in a way this is much better, like you said, you dig it? Do you think this is better than going to an actual classroom? I mean, I know there are pros and cons, right? But do the
Yeah.
pros outweigh the cons in virtual learning?
Um, not sure, right? Because like I said, there really is something to be said about like that social interaction. Because because education, at least the way I've always sort of understood it, is not simply supposed to be the development of one's intellectual capability, but it's more holistic than that, right? It is not only sort of being able to critically think about a piece of information that you are being presented with, but at the same time being able to talk to somebody intelligently and respectfully about it. And when you don't have that same classroom setting, there isn't that same sort of I am engaging with a human being and therefore I have to be more respectful, right? Because behind the screen, it isn't, we don't see the other as a person. We see the other as picture on a screen, which sort of keeps us one level removed from their humanity.
Mhm.
And it goes a long way when we have kids interacting with each other, as opposed to, say, kids just sitting in front of their computers and reading journal articles, right?
One of the things that's lost in all of this is the break, the pause, right? Because I think one of the key factors in absorbing information is to have some space, to have
Yeah.
some time to process it, to have some downtime. And I
Right.
think what the internet has done is it is constantly trying to let us think. It is constantly trying to let us be alert. It's looking for, like you said, the algorithm is looking for something for us to be outraged about,
Yeah.
something to feel passionately about. So the phenomenon of a pause, a break, a moment of silence, perhaps, is
Yeah.
lost in all that because our brains are constantly being stimulated, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
using this medium doesn't allow for a pause. And how do you simulate a pause on your virtual classes?
Um, I tell them don't message me after 4 p.m. Like don't talk to me on the weekends,
Okay.
right? Like that's also for the sake of my sanity.
Okay.
But like I funnily enough, now we tend to be a lot more strict about free time,
Okay.
in the sense that after the last class of the students, that's it. You're not supposed to be working anymore, right? Like over the weekend, that's it. You're not supposed to be working anymore. We gave you time during the class day to work on whatever task we gave you to do. So, you know, you
So do you teach
take that
them?
break.
Is there a way for us to teach them how to pause, how to relax, how because I think that's really the key. I think for you, just like a computer that has a full hard drive, you can't anymore, input more information. You can't anymore add more apps or whatever, any more files into your brain because it's already full. How do we teach them how to develop some space in their minds?
Well, we have recess. Like it's actually part of the schedule. You know, we have lunch and recess as part of the schedule of the students, where ideally they're not supposed to be working.
Mhm.
Um, but if I'm being honest, like part of that is sort of homeschool collaboration, where when the kids aren't supposed to be working, or when the kids are supposed to be stopping to rest, that is when I will purposely take a step back and make sure that I am not there as a presence, because the student, when they feel or see the presence of a teacher, will think like, yeah, it's work time, right? So, when I'm not there, I am hoping that the parent steps in and says, all right, you know, let's have dinner. Like, stop working on that paper, let's have dinner. Or when it's time for recess, I step back and whoever is at home comes in and says, all right, rest. Because there's only so much that I can do. And if I try to engage them to tell them to rest, I don't think they can do that because I represent their work, you know, if that makes sense.
Now, it used to be that being online is something that they do to have fun, right? For entertainment,
Mm.
for
Yeah.
pleasure, and now it has been mixed together, the education, the serious part of them, and the entertainment part of them. So I guess what happens, Zhao, if you tell if the class is over, they're probably going to do something else, but still online, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're probably going to play a game or talk to their friends or whatever, but it's
Right.
still going
Right.
to be online. The satisfaction of going out there and having dinner or taking a walk uh, is gone because they're still constantly on their phones, no matter
Yeah.
what it is that you do. What I'm trying to ask you earlier was, do you tell them something that when after the class is over, to allow all that information to sink in, for them to absorb it and leave some space, and to just sit back and sort of analyze or just enjoy whatever it is that you learned today? Because more often than not, they're probably going to do something else that'll stimulate their brains again, but not but not a class, maybe a game.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that we should take into consideration, or something that, for the most part, I'd like to think that it's implied, but it should be made more explicit, I guess, if that's what you're trying to say. Like, I should take
Yeah.
that into consideration, and the next time I end my class, that's exactly how we'll end it.
Mhm.
But then, again, there's no way for me to quote unquote enforce that, which is, you know, it's like
Yeah,
a shot in the dark.
because I don't think it's enforceable, right? Because what happens in a real classroom situation, it's there's a break, right? There's recess, so they have time to go down and talk to their friends and maybe perhaps talk about what just happened in
Yeah.
class, or talk about what happened to them during their weekend. So there's an actual physical sort of event that happens when there's an actual
Right.
break. But if you're
Yeah.
sitting down in front of a camera and the class is over, like, that
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you're gonna get out of that seat in front of the camera. They're probably gonna do something else, but still with that screen in front of them.
Yeah.
You know
Actually,
what I mean?
what I do tell my students though is, it is good to sort of separate your space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this isn't my bedroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is this is my grandmother used to live here.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I purposely separate this from my bedroom because, I don't want work to sort of spill into my personal life, and it is sort of a physical representation of that, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I do is, even if I'm going to be like recording a podcast after class, I will take the time to shut down the computer and then turn it back on again, just so that there is that physical sort of, this is the end of the work day, and now we begin with the more personal stuff. Um, this is weird. I will even go so far as to use separate web browsers. Like, Chromium is everything work related, and everything that is personal to me is on Firefox, right? So
Mm-hmm.
to sort of create that boundary, that's how I or that's what I like to tell the students, or that's what I like to tell the kids. It helps to create these sort of physical boundaries, and the that that ritual that signifies the end of your school day. That way you can sort of take that break. Again,
Wow,
it was
that's
implied, but
yeah.
not, you know.
Because like much has been said about putting information in our children's heads, right? Teaching them, letting them learn. But not so much has been said about trying to maintain and to help create an environment for better learning, for more, let's say, introspection in terms of
Yeah.
preparing our minds to absorb more information again. You know, a lot of people that I know, meditate or,
Yeah.
go outside and take a smoke or something, just so that they'll have time to get ready for the next batch of information, the next class, the next everything. So are the
Yeah.
universities, are the schools doing enough to sort of not just put information in the hearts and minds of our children, but also to make their minds healthy? Because I think that's a crucial issue now, especially in this day and age. I think mental health is
Oh
more
yeah.
important more than ever, right?
Yeah, yeah. There really is. What's it? Again, I'm not part of the guidance office, but like I do know that they have an entire like mental health program,
Mhm.
and well, that's sort of outside of my job description, and this is a fairly recent phenomenon, at least when it comes to the implementation of it, and arguably coming a little bit too late because of the pandemic. No,
Mhm.
it feels like everybody's scrambling, regardless of like what industry they're in or what it is that they do. And I think we're doing okay, but there is still a long way to go. You know, um, yeah, and like I alluded to earlier, a lot of it comes with a lot of it has to come from a tighter collaboration between the home and the school,
Mhm.
since now more than ever the home is becoming a bigger part of sort of the child's learning, um, right?
Mhm.
So like what was it when we met the parents for the first for the first day of school or before the first day of school, something that we mentioned was precisely that, right? Like, block off a space. This is where the studying happens. That way, when they physically step out of the study space, it is no longer time for them to, engage with the material, but time for, or but yeah, but it is time for the material to percolate, right? Um,
Yeah,
if the,
circulation time, that's very important.
if the kid needs space, make
Processing.
the space like private, so it's a lot more can still be done, but I'd like to think that we're off to a better start than I thought we would be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it is kind of a challenge to simulate, percolation, to simulate space online, right? I mean, like,
Yeah,
you can't really simulate uh, uh, downtime, right? On a platform like a cell phone or a computer, because
yeah,
those are, bits and bytes, zeros and ones, always processing, always trying to get your attention, and to use
yeah,
that platform to simulate pause, to simulate the relaxation, to simulate some sort of meditation is probably next to impossible, right? But I do know a lot of apps that are for meditation, right? Online.
yeah. That's kind of ironic, huh? all of those like all of those apps that like what was it? Those apps that whose function it is to
Help
like
you relax.
stop you from using your phone, right? Like those Pomodoro timers and stuff that
Yeah,
like will,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's I've always found that to be like really funny.
I
Something that
know
I
that you
found.
meant.
Oh, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I
Go
know
ahead.
that I know that you mentioned earlier that it has to be a collaboration between school and the home, right? When it comes to educating your children,
Right.
but a lot of us parents still feel that schools, university schools, and educational institutions are the best sources of the best information, the best research, the best ideas. Our universities, our schools, our educational institutions still the thought leaders in this country? Do we still get all of crucial information from our universities? Do we have that kind of a culture wherein we defer to the experts, we defer to educational institutions when it comes to important matters? Is that the kind of culture that we have in this country, Joe, or we're far from that?
Here, like what I would think, no, is that we do like to defer to the experts. We just can't agree on who the experts are,
Okay.
you know? And it used to be, and again, this is going back to like the internet. It used to be a lot easier when we had these focal points like schools and universities and
Mhm.
think tanks and stuff that were sort of guiding lights in what is good and not so good information. But now everybody can just sort of present their truth, and that is,
Some random person, right, presenting their
yeah,
truth. But you see a lot of
that's
studies on.
dangerous.
Oh, you see a lot of studies online, on television, especially about the pandemic. That there are like John Hopkins University, like all these universities who have these studies. I
Yeah,
know that the University of the Philippines has come out with all of its research. In fact, they also have I think a test that came out a few months ago before during the pandemic, and there's like a model in which they're trying to predict how many will get infected, how many will die of
yeah.
COVID-19. This is from the University of the Philippines. But is this a unique situation? Because this is the first time that I've read information about something that is happening in the country from a university. We here in the Philippines, normally we defer to other universities from other parts of the world, like the John Hopkins University, where we get our data from about the pandemic. Do we have that here in the Philippines? Is the University of the Philippines information about COVID-19 a rare event in our nation's search for information, or is this maybe I've just not been reading a lot about what's going on with the country today? But is this where we get our information most of the time from the schools or in the Philippines, or do we still defer to other universities outside of the Philippines?
I really don't know. I don't have any insight on that. I
Mhm.
haven't been I haven't been to college in like 20 years.
Okay. So, but you know what I'm talking. You know what I'm talking about, right? That
Yeah,
do we
yeah. I mean,
do
like
we
as much
still
as
go ahead?
as much as possible, I try to sort of I sort of try to bring that into my class.
Mhm.
I used to teach this class called Disciplines and Ideas in the Social Sciences,
Mhm.
and a lot of the sources that I used, particularly towards the end, were sort of journal articles coming out of the Ateneo, coming out of UP,
Mhm.
as a way to sort of show the sort of local body of knowledge. And um, that's something that I think we can do sort of a lot more. We can do a lot more when it comes to promoting like local
Our
uh,
our our our,
journals and
teach,
whatnot.
our teachers like you are professors, um, thought leaders in Philippine society now, because I think that is a crucial question. Do we are you guys, because we defer to you when it comes to molding the hearts and minds of our kids, right? But as far as society goes, does do do teachers, do schools, do universities occupy that place, that rarefied place of being thought leaders? Do we still follow the professors and the teachers of the universities, or do we defer to something else after we graduate?
Um, I would like to think that it sort of still is the case, but again, like we mentioned, social media is fast changing that, because it's your truth versus somebody else's truth, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I would say that the educational institutions and sort of think tanks, etc., um, should be seen as thought leaders. But uh, I really don't have too much insight on that.
How about like, for example, research studies? Do we defer to research or studies from universities and schools when it comes to burning issues of the day, or do we just defer to something from the United States, for example? Because I am afraid that of course you can't deny the fact that our similarities with the United States is glaring, right? We
Yeah,
obviously got
yeah,
our
yeah.
we obviously got our constitution It is a mirror, almost like a carbon copy of the Constitution of the United States. That's why our societies are very similar in so many ways.
Right.
Although I would consider the Philippines like a poor USA, like a poor United States. But but
Okay.
uh, but we differ to a lot of our information to universities outside of the Philippines. Why is that the case? Why can't we have our own studies? Why don't we have universities? Why don't we have professors, who we look up to when it comes to burning issues of the day?
Funding.
Funding. Okay, funding.
I mean, I really don't know. That's because a lot of new knowledge is meant to be created at the university level, but I've never taught at the university level, and that's a completely different world to me. So, like
Exactly.
I said, right? It's not something that it's not something that I can speak intelligently to. Um,
Okay, okay.
but what I will say is we can do a lot more in by way of research when it comes to say how things apply to us as Filipinos, like how and this is why the study in UP sort of popped out now, because we're looking at COVID in the Philippines, and who better to talk about COVID in the Philippines than a university in the Philippines, right? But when it comes to, say, the bleeding edge of medical technology, like we don't really have any of that here. So in order to learn what we can, we look abroad and I guess try to bring it back. But um, I really don't know how that is working out practically. I mean, that's how
Yeah,
it should
because
be in theory.
yeah, in theory, that's the way it should be. But we look up to all these thought leaders that are not local. People look up to, let's say, Bill Gates or Steve
Yeah.
Jobs or Elon Musk or Malcolm Gladwell or all these people. But so we have to localize their ideas, their thoughts, their. So I'm desperately searching for local sources of information. I'm desperately looking for a book that will rock my world, written by a Filipino. I probably am not looking hard enough, but it's um, what do you think about that? Do you think that I'm just not looking hard enough? Do we have uh, professors? Do we have writers? Do we have thought leaders from the Philippines that are just as mind blowing as the thought leaders that I mentioned earlier?
Um, I'm going to recommend the book Rizal Without the Overcoat by Ambeth Ocampo.
What, Rizal?
Rizal Without the Overcoat
Okay,
by Ambeth Ocampo.
okay,
Like that guy, he is one of the best historians I think that's currently alive in the Philippines today.
okay, okay.
And I would point you towards his work.
Okay, Beth Ocampo. I'll write that down. Beth Ocampo, Rizal without the overcoat. That's the actual title.
Ambeth Ocampo. Yeah,
I'm Beth Ocampo.
yeah.
Okay,
What's it? He's a history teacher in Ateneo University. Ateneo de Manila University. Sorry,
I
sorry. I
guess
mentioned Ateneo School, but no. And I forgot to
I guess
mention
what I'm
Ateneo
trying
de Cebu.
to look.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, okay. I guess what I'm trying to
Sorry.
look for is not just thought leaders but original thinkers. I want to read something that's original. I want to read something that is not something that's already processed too much that you can't really recognize the person who wrote it. So I guess that particular author, Anbeth Ocampo, is
Yeah,
qualifies as one, right?
yeah. Like I would I can't like praise his work highly enough. One of my favorite authors.
Okay. As from teaching, of course, you're also doing okay. Aside from teaching, of course, Jao, you also have a podcast, right? And what do you think of this medium of podcasting? Because um, podcasting, to me, is sort of like a nuanced conversation about about a lot of things. Like this
Yeah.
conversation that we're having right now, it's not 5 minutes. It's going to take a little bit longer than the usual conversation that everybody's
Yeah.
having. So I think it gives us the whole big picture of certain subject matters. What are your
Good.
thoughts on the medium of podcasting?
I mean, obviously, I love it. It's something that I've been doing since 2013.
Okay.
But for more than anything else, I think it's for practical reasons that I kind of fell in love with podcasting. As a country, we have woefully slow internet connections, and I didn't have a decent camera for the longest time. So instead of like hopping on and making a YouTube video, we just sort of got on a Google Hangouts call and recorded ourselves talking, right? Because that was the thing that could be done at the time, and it just sort of it it broke my heart that Filipinos weren't into listening to podcasts. It just wasn't a thing that we do. Again, this could be sort of speaking to how we are susceptible as a culture to non or more short form media. I don't know. Right? That that could be a thing there. But now that all we have is time, like a lot of people seem to be getting into podcasts more and more. So that's sort of a good thing, I guess.
Uh, Tell me about your podcast, Bodega Nights. What is this all about? Is this something that you do in your actual physical bodega?
It started as a group of friends actually. We had this group of friends and we sort of referred to ourselves as the bodega because like we never really felt like we were part of whatever group everybody else was in, right? We were sort of the scraps. We were sort of the leftovers. And what do you do with the leftovers? You put them into the bodega. So, we were like, yeah, dude, we are the bodega. And we just started recording our geeky conversations one day. Um, we took a bit of a hiatus like last year when we all started when life sort of started getting lifey, if that makes sense.
Like,
Um, yeah, when life started becoming lifey, like I moved to Cebu, right? This
okay.
is because we used to record it with like our buddies in Manila. Right? I went to college in Manila, so my friends that do this podcast are in Manila.
Mhm.
So we used to just sort of sit down at somebody's house or like at a bar or something and like record our conversation. Um, but then yeah, we started growing apart or whatever. But then um, when the pandemic hit, we had a lot more time to sort of get together and talk to each other. Um, the pitch is uh, a bunch of friends get together to talk every week, and this podcast is the thing that makes sure it happens. Right. So more than anything else, it's just us kind of catching up with each other. It isn't yeah.
Podcasting is just uh, becoming more very popular in the United States, right? So it's just probably just a matter of time before it gets more general acceptability here in the Philippines. I think
Yeah.
you're right. It's also a feature of our slow internet here. That's why it takes
Yeah.
time for us Filipinos to get used to listening to hours of just two people or three people talking.
Yeah.
So hopefully, we'll get around. What sort of podcasts, if you don't mind, do you listen to these days, Jao? Do you subscribe to specific podcasts and all that?
Let me check my podcatcher. um, the thing about podcasts is we have like a podcast for everything, right? Like if
Yeah.
you have an interest, there probably is a podcast about that.
Mm-hmm.
I play a lot of Hearthstone, so I have a couple of Hearthstone podcasts. There is a podcast that I listen to about film score because I really love film score. Um,
Film scoring.
yeah. What's it? There another podcast that I started getting into was this guy that I used to work with. I think now he's with the University of San Jose, their political science department or whatever. You might want to sit down and talk to him. He's pretty cool.
What's
I
his
can
name? Maybe
uh
you can get me his name
yeah,
offline, off cam.
yeah. But I can never remember the name of his show because it's got like it's four Cebuano words, and because I didn't grow up in Cebu, like then I've never been good at Cebuano and Cebuano words. So let's just take a look at it. Darn.
That's the beauty of podcasts. You can have nuanced conversations about a lot
Yeah.
of things, and not just sound bites. And that's the thing with information. I mean, like especially, in fact, that's one of the reasons why podcasting is getting a lot of traction. Is because people are sick and tired of just getting 2 minute, 3 minute sound bites about a subject matter when it's so complex and it's so complicated, and there's so much gray area. I mean, like everything is gray. I mean, it's not all in
Yeah.
black and white. The whole thing needs to get a more longer treatment, not just a few minutes. So did you get the name already?
Kasinatian, kasayuran, kasaysayan,
By
kamatuoran.
by
I just call him Riv.
okay. Let
Yeah.
me look for that. Okay.
But yeah, it's on Spotify.
That's very interesting.
Another thing that another set of podcasts that I like to listen to are the ones that I hesitate to use the word inspired, but a number of my students ended up coming up with their own podcasts, and like put them out on like iTunes and Spotify and stuff. So like that's also another thing that I sort of take the time to listen to as well.
Okay,
So
interesting.
yeah, there was this because we started this podcast called The Class Record with some of my colleagues at the Sacred Heart, and some of the students started listening to it, and somebody said, sir, if you're the Class Record, we're going to make a podcast called The Failing Mark. And they actually pushed through with that podcast, right? There's another group of students that are like, we like our discussions when we have lunch, so let's have a podcast called The Lunch Table. And they ended up coming up with their own podcast. And that's another thing that that's those are a couple of the other podcasts that I listen to.
So you have not totally and completely abandoned hope on podcasting. I mean, you're still going to do that, right? I mean, you were mentioning
Of
earlier that
course.
it broke your heart when people weren't so much into podcasting in the Philippines. This was years ago, right? 7 years ago, 2013, right?
Yeah. And I remember with Third World Linux, we got a lot of the feedback that we got were from like people in the US, from people in the UK, right? Like there's this one Linux distribution called Ubuntu Mate. Like one of their developers actually got in touch with us and like started, we started talking about Linux, and um, it, it's pretty cool, right? But at the same time, like it would have been nice if there were more people from here that got in touch with us and be like, yeah, I started using Ubuntu or whatever.
Much of things that are going on now are happening in social media. Much of the things that people do now, they do it on social media. They buy things on social media. They know about things in social media, especially with a whole lockdown thing. A lot of things are going on social media now, primarily here in the Philippines, on
Hmm.
Facebook and on Instagram. Jao, can you help me weed out social media? Tell us about the good, the bad, and the ugly about social media. Starting with the good. What's social media good for?
Well, it is. There's this the internet was meant to be like this thing that was the great democratization of information, and in a lot of ways, that's kind of what social media is, right? It's sort of giving a voice to the voiceless. Those without platforms now have a platform to express, what it is they think, what it is they feel. So there is that is a good thing. Like I mentioned, I didn't grow up in Cebu. I have a lot of friends that aren't from here, and when it comes to at least the social networking part of social media, it means I get to keep in touch with, you know, my friends that aren't from here. So that's something good. It's sort of made the world a much smaller place, and it's made us a lot more aware of what else is out there. In as far as people go, right? Oh, this sort of person exists.
Mhm.
Another good thing that's come from social media is this idea of it being easier to find somebody that is like you, right? So you have like-minded people coming together within the bubble of social media. That can be a good thing or a bad thing, right? It can create this echo chamber, but then at the same time, for somebody that is feeling lost, lonely, for somebody that is misunderstood in their little corner of the world, well, they're no longer confined to their little corner of the world. So, there is that opportunity to make connections. And I think that's the great strength of social media. It's something that helps sort of build bridges between people that otherwise wouldn't have been connected.
So social media has given a voice to the voiceless.
Yeah.
It is a great democratization, right? It's democratizing opinion. But
Yeah.
there are some people who should not have their opinion. I mean, like, uh,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there's a reason why in the real world that voice wasn't heard, because maybe that voice was crap, right? That voice
Yeah.
wasn't all that good. They didn't give enough thought into that idea, into that frame of thinking. So what happens now is anybody, I mean, just anybody, even people who aren't supposed to say their opinion, can now say their opinions, and it has an audience. So
Yeah.
is that really a good thing that it allows everybody, and I mean everybody, to just have an opinion about certain subject matters that they're not even experts at?
Yeah. I mean, um, I've always been of the mindset that I might not necessarily agree with what you're saying, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Like, I can't remember
Okay.
where that
Yeah,
where
yeah.
that quote
Freedom of
comes
speech,
from,
right?
but yeah,
I think
like,
from the American Constitution. Yeah.
yeah, probably one of the founding fathers or whatever
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
said something to that effect. Um,
yeah.
a very sort of libertarian approach, but people should be able to say what they want to say, and it is it
To
is. Oh, wait, sorry, coming in kind of choppy. You, um, but when it comes to the reception of that information, well, it falls on the part of the person receiving to either accept or reject, right?
okay,
And that's where, again, bringing it back to education, that's where we need education.
okay. So that's the good of social media, democratization, and you can have it's easier to access like-minded people. So you
Yeah.
can find your so-called tribe. But the
Yeah.
danger there is, of course, you have this echo chamber, and you're just talking to like-minded people. So your brain never grows. It just becomes
Yeah.
like an echo chamber of what you already believe in. Thus, it just stays in that bubble, and you navigate through that world inside that bubble, because I love that that definition of a bubble, because it is indeed a bubble. You can still go out with the world, imagine a physical bubble, but
Yeah.
you're in a bubble. So all the voices that you hear are just the same voices as you already have in your head, and it just bounces back. That's pretty
Yeah.
dangerous, right?
Yeah. That is really dangerous. Um, that's that's what I'm trying to fight. you know, because it's it's difficult because it wouldn't be it wouldn't be correct to silence somebody that has an opinion, right? Because that opens up sort of the floodgates to more sort of egregious things. Um, but at the same time, sometimes these most fringe of voices are the ones that are like the loudest.
Mhm.
So what what do we have to do? We're not going to silence them because that's exactly what we're trying to fight against. The best that we can do is try to make sure that people that are listening reject ideas that aren't good, that aren't helpful, that aren't truthful, right?
So I guess a lot of that comes from, aside from the parents, from people like you, right? To teach
I hope.
to teach the people how to process information and just accept things because that's what everybody believes in, because that's what everybody thinks is right, and therefore that's the world. Period. I mean,
Yeah,
that is very difficult.
yeah, it is. It is. And there's it's doubly difficult for, well, it's actually, it's quite difficult, right? As a parent, and well, as a teacher. The idea is we don't want to encourage in our kids the idea of we just simply accept all that there is. But then it's kind of hard when we ourselves are sort of imposing that upon them, right?
Mhm.
Like that's a paradox or whatever that I'm kind of having difficulty dealing with, right? Like,
Yeah,
I'm trying to tell you that not everything you hear is necessarily true. So
but
what's stopping you from rejecting everything that I say, right? That's that's the difficulty there.
yeah, it's kind of difficult. Yeah, I know the kind of kind of conundrum that you have. You can't tell them not to believe in everything that you read except for mine, because that'd be weird,
Right?
right?
Yeah, and that also leads to like really dangerous ideas, like, no, that leads to very dangerous behavior, where you simply just accept everything that comes from some sort of higher authority without having to stop and think about it, right? Like, um, if the government were to tell you something, you stop and think about what it is the government is trying to tell you, right? And if at an early age we're socializing our kids to listen to everything that I have to say and have it be gospel truth to them, that's creating a very dangerous behavior. But then at the same time, we kind of have to, right? So I don't know the way out of it.
I know. That's why I'm talking to people like you, because also don't know the way out of it. But maybe you can take us to the dark, the ugly side of the internet. What's the bad, the ugly side of social media?
uh, well, it's when you I would think it's when this bubble is taken a little too far, right?
Mhm.
And take that in combination with the what we were talking about earlier, how there is no human connection, right? uh, it's it's it felt weird seeing you after so many years and not giving you a handshake, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we are a step removed from each other's humanity.
Mhm.
And the um and there is that danger of sort of treating somebody as not being human when you can't identify that person's humanity, or you can't readily see the person's humanity on the other side of that screen.
Mhm.
And so when you have this echo chamber of ideas that further radicalize people to one side or the other, and they're confronted with somebody that isn't presented as human, disagreeing with them, it uh, becomes very easy to sort of fall into the trap of, well,
Groupthink, right? Groupthink, like.
yeah, and how that groupthink is expressed, right?
That's
Um,
pretty dangerous because I know that a lot of terrorist organizations are going online to recruit members
yeah,
because, like you said, it is so easy to think within a bubble, and you have no dissenting opinion, dissenting ideas, different radical ideas are hatched because of this bubble thing. How do you protect your children, or anybody for that matter, not just children? There are a lot of impressionable people out there, adults, who fall victim with these groups. How do you protect yourself? Especially how do you teach children how to protect themselves from becoming radicals?
oh, just repetition.
What's
you know,
that?
repetition.
Repetition.
There's yeah, there's something to be said about repetition. Um, just remind them. Slow down.
Okay.
Right,
Slow
slow
down.
down. When you're presented with information, slow down. Think about it. You know, stop. That sort of thing. And try to instill that as a habit by having them go through the process of slowing down.
And taking a breath, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but then, like I said, no, it's difficult for me to actually do that, but it's easy to remind them, and it's easy to have it kind of implied in, say, the way we set up a schedule, that there is protected time for a break, and you have to take that break. So that's just sort of developing the habit of reflection.
Jao, we have a lot of people watching, hopefully this podcast, listening to this podcast, or watching this video right now, who
Oh no.
are sort of trying to find their way into this coronavirus, right? Trying to navigate through all of this information, trying to figure out their place in the world with all of this information surrounding them on social media. Can't decipher what is true, what is not, what is fake, what is real. What is your message to all of us, not just your students, because I imagine you talk to your students a lot, but to
Mm.
everyone in general watching or listening to this video, or listening to this podcast? What is your message to all of us? Go ahead.
Slow down. Slow down, man. After you type something, close the app. You type a reply on Facebook, close it.
Mhm.
Then come back after like an hour. See if you still want to post it. Right? Um, Pick your battles. Don't be outraged by everything, because your outrage at everything means you aren't properly outraged at something important. You know.
I like that.
Right? But more just slow down, take a break. That's really it. when you type that reply, close the app. Or when you type that, you know, when you type that status, close the app, and then when you open it back up, check to see if you still want to do it, and learn how to just sort of scroll past stuff.
Slow down. I like that. With our limited contact with real people these days, especially with the lockdown, we are left to our own devices, pun intended. We need to be able to have better control and have perhaps better spectacles to view this world of information. In fact, I think the best way to begin is through our own eyes.
Yeah.
That way we may be able to process something original from it, something new, something that you can use and perhaps become useful to many people. Jao, Atienza, thank you so much for doing this. It is always a pleasure to talk to you. I hope we can do this again. I hope you don't give up on your podcasting with Bodega Nights. I'm beginning to listen to your fun conversations in that podcast. Make sure you guys look for it on Spotify at Bodega Nights with Jao and the rest of his friends. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jao Atienza, a educator from the Ateneo de Cebu. He is also a podcaster. He hosts a podcast called Bodega Nights. Thank you so much, man. You take care. Stay safe.
Yeah, man, you too.